CargoWise Landside is deeply committed to revolutionizing landside logistics. With a complete enterprise system built for modern trucking and container drayage operators that includes proven drayage transportation management, digital rate and quote management, real-time container track and tracing, and on-demand truck, trailer, and container storage. Excellence in container drayage starts with the right software. Enhance transportation management, optimize shipment execution, and improve intermodal business operations with Trinium TMS, Draymaster, GeoStamp Track, and SecureSpace. To learn more, please visit cargowise.com/landside.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to TPM Today. I'm Eric Johnson, your host of this show every second and fourth Fridays of every month. I am delighted to be with you today. I have a great guest, super interesting topic, one that's near and dear to my heart in a number of ways. We'll bring him on in just a few minutes. Thanks, as always, to CargoWise Landside for sponsoring the show and making it available to everybody. Thanks so much to the Let's Talk Supply Chain team too for making this easy. I don't say that enough, but there's an awesome team behind it. And thanks to Sarah and show producer Nicole for making this so easy for me to do. I'm really delighted to be with you as I am every week, but so much going on in the world of trade and logistics right now, more than I can possibly cover in a few minutes of opening remarks today. But I do want to highlight a couple things with Journal of Commerce events that are coming up. You've heard me talk about this. Our Break Bulk and Project Cargo conference is coming up fast, less than a month away in the Big Easy, New Orleans, April 23rd through 25th. I will be there. I have a couple different sessions that I'm involved in. One, a cool little focus group type session around technology in that space. And then I'm also doing a one-on-one with an attorney to talk about all of the tariff stuff that is on the top of everybody's minds, including people who are not even in logistics or trade. So really make sure there's still plenty of time to join, plenty of time to register. Join us in New Orleans. Awesome city, awesome time of year. It's not too hot. It's not too cool. It's a great event. It's bigger than ever this year. So join us if you're in that world. Also super exciting. A couple days ago, we launched Inland 25 registration. So Inland, if you don't know, is our large and growing event that focuses on truckload, LTL, intermodal, both domestic and international, and drayage. Sort of connects what we talk about at TPM once it hits the port, sort of what happens to cargo after that, from port to sort of distribution center or final destination. Tons and tons of technology programming in the works. I already have like pretty much my whole idea set out for this, and I've already recruited a bunch of speakers. We're going to be launching an initial agenda for the event in just a couple weeks, so keep an eye out for that. But register now. The prices are not going to be lower than they are right now. So you might as well just book it and get it set in your calendar and make the case for it to whoever needs to be made the case to. So you do not want to miss this event. Okay, really quickly, 2 stories this week. I did a story on Uber Freight. We've written a bunch. I've written a bunch about especially how sort of the digital freight brokers, as they were once called and maybe still are called, have invested a lot into drop and hook trailer pools. I wrote this week about Uber Freight sort of being able to sequence these drop and hook moves in such a way as to extend the reach for a shipper. So if you're a large shipper, now you can look at hauls that were a little longer than Uber Freight was previously sort of enabling. The benefit, as Uber Freight describes it, is they get better optimization of these assets that they're leasing, that they have to, utilization, I should say. The carriers get more consistent, longer haul volume, so there's higher revenue potential for them. And then the shippers with sort of large volume but irregular patterns on that volume have a little flexibility, so they don't have to sign up for a dedicated contract, but this sort of gives them a dedicated type of offering if they use it. So very interesting. As with always, I write about this stuff. It will be interesting to see if it works in practice. Your mileage may vary, but definitely interested to see where this goes and your thoughts on it. Second article, really quick. I do not have a lot of time, and this is a very complicated and long-running topic, but my colleague Peter Tershwell wrote this week about what is sort of a reemergence of this old freight futures and container shipping discussion that has been going on since around the financial crisis in 2008. There's been a lot of different attempts to sort of create a market with enough liquidity that someone could hedge with an actual, non-physical freight contract and kind of smooth out the volatility that's pretty inherent in the industry. What's interesting today what's interesting right now is there's an exchange in Shanghai where there's a ton of volume being transacted, much larger than the actual amount of volume that's being transacted in actual freight moves. And it's not really industry participants that are doing it. It's sort of financial players that are doing this. So be interesting to see that the roadblock has always been very difficult to get shippers, very difficult to get carriers involved in participating in this, because the carriers don't want to be seen as sort of further commoditizing ocean freight. The shippers aren't necessarily set up internally to sort of use hedging products in this way. So anyway, very interesting. We'll see where it goes. Like the last story, we'll see where it goes from here. But with no further ado, I'm super excited to bring on Tom Durrenberger, who's the CEO of a company called BravoTran, which you may have heard of. If you haven't, you're going to hear a little bit more about it today. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, okay, before we get into BravoTran, give people a little bit of background on yourself before you started BravoTran.
Yep. Yeah, sure. So I actually my first job was working civil service for the Navy, but after that I spent many years as a consultant. I wound up going to business school, came out and did a little more consulting, and I watched too many Steve Jobs videos on YouTube and wanted to do kind of a startup thing. Wound up getting hired by a company called BravoTran, and the CEO at the time, Matt Bernstein, that was HubTran at the time, and that was back in 2020. So it was right before.
Going on that time? Yeah.
there were some things going on shortly thereafter. So that's how I got into it.
No turtleneck though, or the mock turtle.
I'm not. You can only take these things so far.
Style. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's right.
That's fair. That's fair. Like Elizabeth Holmes, you don't want to be too much down the Steve Jobs path. So
I can do a deeper voice if that.
No, we'll go with your regular voice. Okay. So, what's BravoTran? Who are your customers, and what sort of functional areas are you touching?
Yeah, so we're the forwarder payables automation experts. It's forwarder payables automations end to end. So it's all of your AP invoices. If you're a forwarder, basically anything that you're getting from, the steamship lines, the truckers that you're working with, port handling, whatever, overseas agents, we absorb those, we read them in, we match them up to accounting entries and manage the exceptions that kind of invariably come up in that process and make sure they get posted. We also have kind of some downstream stuff that will reconcile them against statements of account and actually a new payments module that's also integrated into BravoTran. We're the biggest in this space. We do more invoices than anybody else. We're going to process 10 million AP invoices for our customers this year. We have 200 customers in 45 countries. That's what we do. That's what we're about. All AP all the time.
Well, when I alluded earlier to, like, you sort of covering a lot of bases that I focus on, for a long time I felt like I was the only one, only journalist covering freight payment and audit, and trucking, whatever, especially on the international side. Super interested, and have been and continue and will forever be interested in what software forwarders need to sort of keep themselves relevant and on the cutting edge. And then obviously automation is like inescapable at this point. So we'll get into all that stuff. I think it would be helpful though, maybe people don't know the origin of BravoTran, and that's an interesting kind of tale in and of itself. Can you explain sort of, you referenced HubTran a second ago. what's sort of the story of BravoTran as it relates to HubTran?
Yeah, so HubTran was focused on domestic freight payables, so for like domestic freight brokers and factoring companies, and that's kind of our sister company. It was founded back in 2015, and it ran and ultimately was acquired in 2021 by TriumphPay. And at the time that company was acquired, the CEO at the time and I and a few others had this, the bright idea to, hey, we're selling this AP automation product to freight brokers and factoring companies domestically in the U.S. We could probably sell something similar to forwarders and kind of take a lot of the expertise and technical skills that we had developed and spin something out for forwarders. As I've said in the past, it's definitely a case of like, we did this not because it was easy, but because we thought it was going to be easy. It wound up being
the famous John F. Kennedy quote.
Right, exactly. Wound up being quite a bit more difficult. Forwarders are kind of similar. If you squint, they're pretty similar to domestic freight brokers, but the details really matter, which is maybe one of the themes around automation. The details of the process that you're automating really matter, and you have to have a tool that meets those needs. So we built that tool. We invested a lot to build that tool, and now we've got a great product. We're really happy with it, and so are our customers.
What was the and maybe take this back to the BravoTran, the HubTran days, but continuing on when the idea was like, let's see if we can replicate this in some way in the forwarding space. Why the focus on payables?
Yeah, so the original idea for HubTran, it came from our former CEO, Matt Bernstein, who I referenced before. He actually ran a domestic freight brokerage, and he found that, as his business grew, he had this process that basically did not scale, right? Or it scaled kind of linearly, or maybe even worse than linearly, with the number of shipments that he was running. And that process was around AP, right? Just getting these invoices from trucking companies and reconciling them, recording the final invoice details, and getting them posted. So it's a process that is kind of intensely manual, but it's one that's ultimately related to kind of the scorekeeping for the business, right? Like, that's how you're evaluating the success or failure, the profitability of your business. So it's a worthy problem for us. So we've necked down and really we just focus on payables because, hey, it turns out to be pretty complex, and we would much rather offer kind of one very good solution that works well than a few solutions that don't. It's also been really helpful from the perspective of being able to develop like really extreme domain expertise, right? Like, when you've done this literally 200 times, we're the world experts on this one thing. And that means when there are process changes which sometimes are required, we can speak from a position of, authority. We've seen this exact situation before. We know what good looks like. We know what changes need to be made in order to make for a better process.
Yeah. So what, just real briefly, from a forwarding perspective, your customers, what systems are you sort of interfacing with that they use? Not brands, but like types of systems that you're interfacing with?
Yeah, so we're integrated with the systems of record that our customers are using. So the forwarding applications that they work with, the places where they're recording their operational or sometimes overhead charges, right? The details of those. We're expecting to find expected costs, right? We receive an invoice. We're expecting to be able to match that up, find the shipment or consolidation or other kind of job record that's related to, match up, make sure everything kind of aligns, and then get the invoice posted. There's a lot of subtleties in terms of how you do that, given the different systems that are involved. I know it sounds real simple.
Having covered it for 15 years, I know it's anything but, right?
Right. Yeah.
What do you think people sort of don't fully understand? Because I remember at one point I had a forwarding software person tell me, and this was someone who's dealing with a lot of forwarders, like in Asia, especially. Yeah. Sort of, and I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try to make it understandable enough for you and the audience to understand where I'm going with this. Essentially, a forwarder is you don't own any assets, you don't own any cargo. So essentially, you are you're taking in money on one side and you're paying out money on the other, and the success of the business is essentially balancing that in a way that you're not, you don't have enough to pay, you're taking this in fast enough to pay that, and also obviously your workers and margin and investors and all that. Is that like too simplistic a way to think about it, or is this the challenge that you're sort of like
no, I mean, so they're third-party logistics companies, right? And yeah, you're selling this freight move to a shipper at a certain price, and you're paying your vendors, the ones who actually move the freight, at a different price, and you kind of collect the difference. I think that just mention in passing, in that way, they're kind of similar to the way that a bank operates. It's almost like a series of like short-term loans where you're paying for something and then you get paid back.
That's what I meant. Like the amount, if you can maneuver in such a way that you can hold on to money for a little bit longer in that interchange, that's a measure of success, right?
Or get paid back a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So they're one of the things that we discovered in this process. So when I just described kind of that process, the original idea behind our predecessor company, HubTran, right? It was around kind of labor savings. But I think the big thing that people don't understand in this space is that the real value from payables automation, particularly for forwarders, is not primarily about labor savings, is primarily about margin uplift and cash flow. What we find in this space is that, candidly, a lot of times our customers, prior to using BravoTran, they aren't spending a lot of time focused on getting accurate accruals entered, right? Basically the expected costs that are entered. And some of this was bad behavior that was learned during the pandemic, when things were kind of, people were rushing to just, get shipments moving and, make sure that things were getting put on ships.
And the margins were good no matter which way.
Margins were good. It didn't really matter, right? Like people were making money hand over fist. But if you aren't paying attention to those and you don't have a good process around it, I can basically guarantee, right, that you are being misbilled by your customer or by your vendors. And then there are probably some number of charges that are going uninvoiced to your customers that should be. So like we have really good data on this from our customers that see margin uplift from about, their gross margin kind of on a pre-BravoTran baseline is about 18.5%. After using BravoTran for 12 months, that increases to 23%. So let's lift a 4.5% on your gross margin. This is, even on a mid-sized forwarder, this is millions of dollars, right? That are going basically misbilled, that our customers are otherwise just eating, or should be disputing but aren't, or should be passing on to their shippers but aren't. I mean, if you're not paying attention to that, it's like being a pro athlete but not paying attention to the score, right? It doesn't make any sense.
Just doing it for the love of the game.
Really important, right? Exactly.
Matter who wins or loses, right?
Exactly. Well, we care. We care who wins and loses.
No, that's interesting. I mean, I think. Well, okay. I think this sort of leads to another question that I've had, like big picture, that you're probably extremely well suited to answer. So as long as I've been covering this space, there's an assumption that a certain percentage of bills, and it swings wildly. Like I hear, it's 99% of bills are inaccurate, and 30% or 20% or whatever the number is, it's definitely not 0, and it's definitely not even 5. It's probably double digits, if not higher.
Yeah.
Why is invoice accuracy in the industry so low chronically? And maybe more importantly, is there anything that's actually going to fix it, or is it the job of you and other vendors in the space to sort of like abstract that from view?
Yeah. So I think I think the number is probably like, it varies wildly, but I think it's kind of on the order of 30.
That's okay. That's the one in my head that I always go with. So that's good validation for that.
Yeah, that's maybe the midpoint of kind of all of those estimates. I think there are different reasons for it, but I think fundamentally one reason why invoice, by the way, those are the ones that get caught, right?
Right.
Maybe more than that, right?
Yeah,
like we don't know. That's maybe an educated guess. I think accuracy is low in large part because it's allowed to be, right? So like in this space in particular. So like, let me contrast this with like domestic freight brokerages where, in almost all cases, the contracts that those brokers had with their customers were a fixed fee, right? So you sell it for this, you pay the trucker that, right? You get this minus that, and like that's it, right? It's real cut and dry. With forwarders, it's often not quite as simple as that. Sometimes charges are getting marked up and so on. But in the freight brokerage world, it's really cut and dry. I mean, we have witnessed in that world a broker call up a trucker over like $2 in unexpected tolls, right? Like
Sure.
Really.
Yeah.
And in contrast, in the forwarder world, we still, especially with new customers, we see cases where an invoice will come in and it's just been completely unaccrued, right? And you ask the very reasonable next question, which is, how do you know if this is the right amount or not? And you don't get a very confidence-inspiring answer. So, I mean, the good news is that we give customers all the tools they need to, spot and address those issues. But I think a lot of it starts with, getting things right in terms of the forwarder processes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like from a psychological standpoint, if a biller or an invoicer knows that most of the people that receive that invoice are not going to question it, and even if they do, it's going to be kind of a laborious process that they don't really want to like undertake. That's going to influence their behavior. Whereas if every person receiving that invoice has a system they're running through that tells it straight away whether it's accurate or not, that might encourage them to bill them. And I know there's shipping lines that are taking this seriously. For instance, like I know that there are certain ones that are saying, we're using automation on the invoice generation side to make sure we are not billing inaccurately as far as we know. So
Right.
It's definitely not universal, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
So, okay, let's jump into the automation. I feel like we, kind of teased that enough to
Sure.
wait for the last 8 minutes of the show to get to it. So, I mean, like automation, obviously everywhere, AI everywhere. Let's put the AI stuff aside and just focus on the automation part, because I think that's the more realistic and tangible part or thing that people can grab onto. So why do you think 3PLs, forwarders have to be really, or do they have to be like super focused on automation these days?
So I think they have to be focused on automation because there's a real opportunity there, right? You should be realistic about what the actual opportunity is. There's kind of like the classic dumb guy mistake, which is to look at something that has existed in a certain way for a long time and think that it's ripe for disruption, as opposed to like it's existed that way for a long time because maybe that way has something, right? Yeah. There's a reason why it exists that way, right? Like, but we think in terms of like how many shipments can a single operator manage, which is really, at one time, which is a KPI that some of our, smartest customers pay attention to. And there's, that number as opposed to that process, but that number has remained kind of flat for a long period of time. And I think, as you see automation, it's never going to like make an operator obsolete, but it should be able to allow operations teams to do more, manage more shipments. But the other reason to pay attention to automation, candidly, is so that you don't get hoodwinked, right? Like it's really easy to sell the vision, right? And as many of our competitors have discovered, it's actually hard to deliver the goods in practice like these. And this is, again, one of the benefits of specializing in this space and just kind of this one process. You're automating specific processes, which means that you really have to understand how those processes work in practice. Maybe a slight digression here on the subject of getting hoodwinked. I think large forwarders are kind of particularly susceptible to this because they're making decisions at a level that is very abstracted away from the people kind of on the ground who are using those tools. And that's what we see. Like there are large forwarders out there who always they always seem to be using the last generation of technology, like the stuff that doesn't quite work because there was a vision that was sold that was never really delivered, but that hasn't maybe percolated up to the C-suite yet.
That goes into my long running sort of thought around, we've just gone through a period that probably started around blockchain, where top-down investment into technology, like we've used abstract a lot, to like sort of technology TM was kind of very de rigueur, right? Like C-suite reads something in a magazine. How do we get that into the into our company?
Right.
As opposed to letting the operations people say, this is a problem. Let's go out in the market and find like a solution that's actually addressing this problem, whether it's blockchain or AI or whatever. So
let me say, we love large customers, and we're serving a number of them. There is a certain benefit to serving small customers, which is that when you're serving them, and you're talking to the person who maybe set up the original processes or founded the company or whatever, they can see very quickly when things work or don't work. So,
let's, if we can touch on kind of like, I think one of the things that's been really interesting for me to observe over the last 6 months, especially, is just this like meteoric rise of pitches around agentic AI and, bots helping with a specific problem. Is that something like how should people tuning in like think about how to absorb what's going on without getting overwhelmed and over marketed to, essentially?
I think returning to a previous comment, it's really about thinking about the specific process that you have, right? So like, I think there are two things, right? I think there's kind of the process and fitting the automation solution into that process, which is a lot harder than what you might think at the beginning. But then there's the other thing. So like, the thing that's been offered is letting chatbots provide quotes to shippers and do these sorts of things. But when you're doing that, you may be giving up. If you kind of go down that route, you may be giving up one of the things. You're getting rid of one touch point with your customer, right? Exactly. Which there's something about the things that make you successful that you may be giving away if you're people don't actually want to talk to chatbots, right? People don't usually appreciate that. So I think that's something to be mindful of.
You want the efficiency of a chatbot, but the like human aspect of a real person.
Right. It better be pretty good. It better be pretty good. It better be able to chat with you about, baseball scores or something else, I guess.
What about the weather today? So, okay, cool. Well, we could go on and on. I do have to, I ask this of every guest of mine, so you don't get out, you're not off the hook on this. Who is your favorite musician or band? And you have to tell me why.
So I play fingerstyle guitar. Like that's what I do is like a hobby. So,
like bluegrass or like flamenco or what?
No, like much more the hillbilly redneck style. So country music type stuff. So guys like Merle Travis, he was kind of the original guy, but then later on there was Chet Atkins and Jerry Reed, and those are maybe you asked for one, I gave you three. Those are the guys who are like they're at the very top. You're still, you could be playing their stuff for a long time, so yeah. I think they're very, very inventive guitarists, and I really appreciate what they do.
I dig it. This is a new one. So I'm always glad when I think almost every single guest has had a new artist. I can't remember more than one or two that have said duplicates. So it's cool. We have eclectic taste in our industry.
That's good. Yeah,
that is good. It would be boring.
It's a big tent.
Same thing. Tom, thank you so much. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
BravoTran.com. If you're interested, if you have AP problems, or if you're not using an AP solution today, it's about margin. It's really important. Anyway, reach us on the website, BravoTran.com.
Cool. Thanks so much, Tom. Great conversation. Talk to you soon. Okay, quickly. I think I'm going to finish on time. Dad joke of the week time. I love this joke. What did the Dalai Lama say to the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. So deep. Give it a second. Then it will take you, especially if you're watching White Lotus this season. So, I don't want to be any spoiler. It's no spoiler on that. It's just, it fits in with with a theme in White Lotus this season. So in any case, thank you, Tom. Really appreciate your super interesting perspective on a space that I follow very closely. Thanks to Scott. Thanks to Lynn, Aurelien, John, Fiorella. Who am I missing? Shams, Rob. Thank you, everyone who tuned in and commented. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you, as always, for supporting TPM Today. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with our next episode. Can't wait to see everyone. Have a great weekend, everyone.